with part 4 of this week's reading of the Messianic Jewish Family Bible, Tree of Life Version, TLV, and we are about to read chapter 8, which is dedicating the temple. Then Solomon assembled the elders of Israel, all the heads of the tribes, and the ancestral chieftains of the children of Israel, to King Solomon in Jerusalem, to bring the Ark of the Covenant of Adonai up from the city of David, which is Zion. All the men of Israel assembled themselves to King Solomon at the feast in the month of Ethanim. Now that is spelled Ethanim, which is the 7th month. Then all the elders of Israel came, and the Kohanim brought up the ark. They brought up the ark of Adonai, the tent of meeting, and all the holy vessels that were in the tent of the Kohanim, and the Levites brought them up. Now King Solomon and all the congregation of Israel who were assembled to him were with him before the ark, sacrificing so many sheep and oxen that they could not be numbered or counted. The Kohanim brought the ark of the covenant of Adonai to its place into the inner sanctuary of the house, to the Holy of Holies, under the wings of the cherubim. For the cherubim spread out their wings over the place of the ark, and the cherubim covered the ark and its poles from above. But the poles were so long that the ends of the poles were seen from the holy place before the inner sanctuary, but they could not be seen outside. There they are to this day. Nothing was in the ark except the 2 tables of stone that Moses put there at Horeb, when Adonai cut a covenant with the children of Israel when they came out of the land of Egypt. Now, when the Kohanim came out of the holy place, the cloud filled the house of Adonai, so that the Kohanim could not stand to minister because of the cloud, for the glory of Adonai filled the house of Adonai. Then Solomon spoke. Adonai said that he would dwell in the thick cloud. I have surely built you a magnificent house, a place for your dwelling forever. Then the king turned his face about and blessed the whole congregation of Israel. While the whole congregation of Israel was standing, he said, Blessed be Adonai, the God of Israel, who spoke with his mouth to my father David, and has fulfilled it by his hand, saying, Since the day I brought my people Israel out from Egypt, I have not chosen a city out of all the tribes of Israel to build a house where my name would be there, but I have chosen David to be over my people Israel. Now it was in the heart of my father David to build a house for the name of Adonai, the God of Israel. But Adonai said to my father David, Because it was in your heart to build a house for my name, you did well that it was in your heart. Nevertheless, you will not build the house, but your son will come out, who will come out of your loins. He shall build the house for my name. Now Adonai had fulfilled his word that he spoke, for I have risen in the place of my father David, and sit on the throne of Israel, as Adonai promised. Also I have built a house for the name of Adonai, the God of Israel, and have set there a place for the ark, in which is the covenant of Adonai, which he made with our fathers when he brought them out of the land of Egypt. Then Solomon stood before the altar of Adonai in the presence of all the congregation of Israel, spread out his hands towards heaven, and said, Adonai, God of Israel, there is no God like you in heaven above or on earth below, keeping covenant and loving kindness to your servants who walk before you with all their heart. You have kept what you promised with your servant David my father. Yes, you spoke with your mouth and fulfilled it with your hand, as it is this day. Now therefore, Adonai, God of Israel, keep with your servant David my father what you have promised him, saying, You shall not lack a man to sit before me on the throne of Israel, if only your children watch their way, walking before me as you have walked before me. Now therefore, God of Israel, please let your words be confirmed, which you spoke to your servant, my father David. So will God really dwell on the earth? Behold, heaven and the earth of heaven cannot contain you. How much less this house that I have built? Nevertheless, turn to the prayer of your servant and to his supplication. Adonai, my God, to listen to the cry and to the prayer which your servant prays before you this day. Let your eyes be open towards this house night and day, towards the place of which you have said, My name shall be there, listening to the prayer which your servant shall pray towards this place. So listen to the supplication of your servant and of your people Israel when they pray toward this place. Hear in heaven your dwelling place, and when you hear, forgive. If a man sins against his neighbor and is made to take an oath and comes and swears before your altar in this house, then hear from heaven and act and judge your servants, condemning the wicked, bringing his way on his own head, and justifying the righteous, giving him according to his righteousness. When your people Israel are defeated before an enemy because they have sinned against you, if they turn back to you and confess your name and pray and make supplication to you in this house, then hear from heaven and forgive the sin of your people Israel and bring them back to the land which you gave to their fathers. When the skies are shut up and there is no rain because they have sinned against you, yet if they pray toward this place and confess your name and turn from their sin because you have afflicted them, then hear from heaven and forgive the sin of your servants and your people Israel. Teach them the good way in which they should walk, and send rain on your land which you gave to your people as an inheritance. If there is famine in the land, if there is pestilence, if there be blight or mildew, locust or caterpillar, if their enemy should besiege them in the land of their cities, whatever plague or sickness, when prayer or supplication is made by anyone or by all your people Israel, each knowing the plague of his own heart, when one spreads his hands toward this house, then may you hear from heaven, your dwelling place, forgive and act, and give to each man according to all his ways, as you know his heart to be, for you alone know the hearts of all the children of men. Then they will fear you all the days that they live in the land that you gave to our fathers. Moreover, concerning the foreigner who is not of your people Israel, when he comes from a distant country because of your name, for they will hear of your great name, of your mighty hand and your outstretched arm, when he comes to pray towards this house, then may you hear from heaven your dwelling place, and do according to all that the foreigner asks of you. So all the peoples of the earth may know your name to fear you, as your people Israel do, and know that this house that I have built is called by your name. When your people go out to battle against their enemy, by whatever way you send them, and they pray to Adonai towards the city which you have chosen, and towards the house which I have built for your name, then hear from heaven their prayer and their supplication, and maintain their cause. If they sin against you, for there is no man that does not sin, and you become angry with them, and deliver them to the enemy, and their captors carry them away captive to the land of the enemy, far off or near, yet if they take it to their heart in the land that they have been carried captive, and they repent and make supplication to you in the land of their captors, saying, we have sinned, we have committed iniquity, we have acted wickedly, and they return to you with all their heart and with all their soul in the land of their enemies who carried them into exile, and pray to you towards the land that you gave to their fathers, the city that you have chosen, and the house which I have built for you for your name, then hear their prayer and their supplication in heaven, your dwelling place, maintain their cause, and forgive your people who have sinned against you, as well as their transgressions they have transgressed against you, and grant them mercy before their captors, so they may have mercy on them. For they are your people and your inheritance that you brought out of Egypt, out of the middle of the iron furnace. May your eyes be open to the supplication of your servant and to the supplication of your people Israel, listening to them whenever they cry to you. For you have set them apart from among all the peoples of the earth to be your inheritance, as you spoke by the hand of Moses, your servant, when you brought our fathers out of Egypt, my Lord Adonai. When Solomon finished praying this entire prayer and petition to Adonai, he arose from before the altar of Adonai, from kneeling on his knees with his hands spread out toward heaven. Then he stood and blessed all the congregation of Israel with a loud voice, saying, blessed be Adonai, who has given rest to his people Israel according to all that he promised. Not a single word has failed all his good promise, which he promised by the hand of Moses, his servant. May Adonai Eloheinu be with us as he was with our fathers. May he not leave us nor forsake us. May he incline our hearts towards him, to walk in all his ways and keep his mitzvot, his statutes, and his ordinances, which he commanded our fathers. May these words of mine, with which I have made supplication before Adonai, be near Adonai Eloheinu day and night, so that he may maintain the cause of his servant and the cause of his people Israel as each day requires. May all the peoples of the earth know that Adonai, he is God, there is no other. Let your heart therefore be wholly devoted to Adonai Eloheinu, to walk in his statutes and to keep his commandments as it is today. Now the king and all Israel was with him and all Israel with him offered sacrifices before Adonai. Solomon offered a sacrifice of fellowship offerings to Adonai, 22,000 oxen and 120,000 sheep. So the king and all the children of Israel dedicated the house of Adonai. On that same day, the king consecrated the middle of the court that was before the house of Adonai, for there he offered the burnt offering and the grain offering and the fat of the fellowship offerings, because the bronze altar that was before Adonai was too small to accommodate the burnt offerings, the grain offering, and the fat of the fellowship offerings. So Solomon and all Israel with him celebrated the festival at that time, a great congregation from the entrance of Hamath to the Wadi of Egypt before Adonai Eloheinu 7 days, and then 7 more days, 14 days in all. On the eighth day he sent the people away, and they blessed the king and went to their tents joyful and glad of heart over the goodness that Adonai had shown to his servant David and to his people Israel. And that is the end of chapter 8. Very interesting prayer, because as you see, what does happen is the very things that Solomon is talking about. If Israel sins against Adonai and they're carried into captivity, um, and if they turn back to him, he will answer their prayers. And we see all of that is going to happen. That's a spoiler alert. Um, he had prayed it. It's very interesting. And just a reminder, Adonai Eloheinu is the Lord our God. That's what it means in Hebrew. And we're moving into chapter 9, Promise and Warning. Now it came to pass when Solomon had finished building the house of Adonai, the royal palace, and all that Solomon was pleased to do, that Adonai appeared to Solomon a second time, just as he had appeared to him at Gibeon. Adonai said to him, I have heard your prayer and your petition that you made before me. I have consecrated this house which you have built, to put my name there forever, and my eyes and my heart will be there every day. As for you, if you will walk before me as your father David walked, in integrity of heart and uprightness, doing all I commanded you, keeping my statutes and my ordinances, then I will establish the throne of your kingship over Israel forever, as I promised your father David, saying, You shall not lack a man on the throne of Israel. But if you or your sons will indeed turn away from following me, not keeping my mitzvot and my statutes that I have set before you, and go and serve other gods and worship them, then I will cut off Israel from the land which I have given them, and this house which I have consecrated for my name I will cast out of my sight. So Israel will become a proverb and a byword among all peoples. This house, now so exalted, everyone passing by it will gasp in shock and hiss, saying, Why has Adonai done thus to this land and to this house? They will be told, Because they forsook Adonai their God, who brought their fathers out of the land of Egypt, and embraced other gods, and worshipped them and served them, before Adonai has brought all therefore Adonai has brought all this evil on them. So that is the first part, where God is actually coming to Solomon and telling him he is granting all that he's petitioning him, but if they fall away from him, this is what will happen. He will, um, actually abandon the house. Solomon's economic achievements. Now, at the end of 20 years, during which Solomon had built the two houses, Adonai's house and the royal palace, since King Hiram of Tyre had furnished Solomon with cedar and cypress logs and with gold for all his desire. In return, King Solomon gave Hiram 20 cities in the land of Galilee. So Hiram came out from Tyre to see the cities that Solomon had given him, but he was not pleased with them. He said, What are these cities that you've given me, my brother? So they have been called the land of Kabul, Kabul, to this day. Hiram had also sent the king 120 talents of gold. Now, this was the purpose of the forced labor that King Solomon had imposed to build Adonai's house, his own house, the Millo, the wool of Jerusalem, Hazor, Megiddo, and Gezer. Pharaoh, king of Egypt, had gone up, captured Gezer, burned it with fire, killed the Canaanites who dwelt in the city, and had given it as dowry for his daughter Solomon's wife. So Solomon rebuilt Gezer, Lower Beth Horon, Baalath, and Tadmor in the wilderness in the land, as well as the storage cities, chariot cities, and cavalry cities, and that it pleased Solomon to build in Jerusalem and Lebanon, and all in the land of his dominion. So I just want to back up just a moment before we go further in this chapter. When Hiram is saying, talking about the cities that um, Solomon had given to him, he's actually saying these cities are good for nothing for him. And when Hiram had sent to the king 120 talents of gold, it's about 9,000 pounds of gold. As for all the people that were left of the Amorites, the Hittites, the Perizzites, the Hivites, and the Jebusites who were not of the children of Israel, even their children who remained in the land after them, whom the children of Israel were not able to destroy utterly, on them Solomon imposed forced labor until this day. But Solomon did not make slaves of the children of Israel, for they were the men of war, his servants, his officials, his captains, his charioteers, and his horsemen. These were the chief officers who were over Solomon's work, 550 who supervised the people who did the work. As soon as the Pharaoh's daughter came up out of the city of David to her house built for her, he built the Millo, and that's spelled Millo. Now, 3 times a year, Solomon offered burnt offerings and fellowship offerings on the altar that he built for Adonai, burning incense with them on the altar that was before Adonai when he finished the house. King Solomon also built a fleet of ships in Ezion Geber, which is near Elath, on the shore of the Sea of Reeds, in the land of Edom. Hiram sent his servants with the fleet, sailors who knew the sea, along with Solomon's servants. So they went to Ophir and took from there 420 talents of gold and brought it to King Solomon. So next we move on to chapter 10, and that is Queen of Sheba marvels. Now, when the Queen of Sheba heard about the fame of Solomon because of the name of Adonai, she came to test him with hard questions. So she came to Jerusalem with a very great retinue with camels carrying spices and gold in great abundance and precious stones. When she came to Solomon, she spoke with him of all that was on her heart. Solomon answered all of her questions. Nothing was hidden from the king that he did not explain to her. So when the queen of Sheba saw all the wisdom of Solomon, the palace that he had built, the food at his table, the seating of his courtiers, the attendance of his servants and their attire, his cupbearers, and his burnt offering, which he offered in the house of Adonai, she was left breathless. Then she said to the king, "It was a true report that I heard in my own land of your deeds and of your wisdom, but I didn't believe the report until I came and my eyes saw it. Indeed, not even the half was told to me. You're way past the report of wisdom and prosperity that I've heard. Blessed are your people, blessed are your courtiers who are standing continually before you, listening to your wisdom. Blessed be Adonai your God, who delighted in you to set you on the throne of Israel. It is because of Adonai's everlasting love for Israel that he made you king to do justice and righteousness." Then she gave the king 120 talents of gold, a great quantity of spices and precious stones. Never again did such an abundance of spices come as what the queen of Sheba gave to King Solomon. Also, Hiram's ships that brought from Ophir a great quantity of sandalwood and precious stones. The king made from the sandalwood a railing for the house of Adonai and for the royal palace, and also lyres and harps for the singers. Never again did such quantity of sandalwood come in, nor have they been seen to this day. So King Solomon gave to the Queen of Sheba all her desire, whatever she asked for, besides what King Solomon gave her out of his royal bounty. And she and her servants left and returned to her own land. And I'm going to pause this for now and come back with the second part of chapter 10, Solomon's splendor.